In my research of studying some of the most effective leaders, where care is a pillar in their leadership practice, I didn't just interview them, the leaders, but I also interviewed those they served. And what's so fascinating is that there was a trend amongst those they served. None of them referred to their leader, their manager, or their boss as any of those titles. In fact, they all referred to them as mentor, teacher, and sometimes even friend. In fact, one of the people who did this was my dad's first employee, Hugang. My dad was an industrial designer. He worked at a large public company designing their products, and ultimately he'd go and figure out their supply chain, where to make their products, how to make their products. And pretty early on in my dad's career, he was tasked with going overseas to China to open up an office there. So he flies overseas, he interviews a bunch of employees, and he ends up ultimately hiring a young man named Hugang. And from that day forward, my dad and Hugang would spend a lot of time together. And over their 10 plus years of working together, whenever my dad was in China, they were attached by the hip. They did everything together. They traveled together. They went to every factory together. They ate every meal together, every hotel together. When I say everything, I mean everything. And in their 10 plus years of working together, they built a relationship that transcended boss and employee. In Hugang's words, my dad was more than a boss. He was a mentor, teacher, and even a friend. Unfortunately, when I was 20 years old, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And about 7 months later, he wasn't doing too well. He went to the hospital. And it was then that he found out that his treatment didn't work. He didn't know how much time he had left, so a couple days go by and he calls Hugang to let him know the news. And Hugang was devastated. That night, Hugang booked his flight and was on that plane the next morning. A flight from Shanghai to New York City. 16 hours later, he arrived in New York. He wanted to see my dad one more time to say thank you, to express his gratitude for having the chance to work together, to grow together, to learn together. When he got to New York City, he got right in the taxi and drove straight to the hospital. He spent that afternoon with my dad. They held hands. They smiled as they reminisced about the past. They laughed as they shared some of their fondest memories. And they cried as they said their final goodbyes. Hugang left the hospital, got back in a taxi, and was on the next flight out back home to Shanghai. He didn't do this because he had any business incentive, no motive to get ahead. In fact, no one from work even knew that he made this trip. He paid out of his own pocket. He took his time away from his own family. He did this because he felt he needed to say goodbye, because he cared so deeply for his mentor, his teacher, and his friend. And my dad cared so deeply for him. Shortly after my dad passed away, Hugang left the company because he felt his biggest supporter was gone. And look, without a doubt, my dad was his boss, but he was also so much more than just a boss. And my invitation to all of you is to go beyond your given role and be more for your people, because you can. Look, as I think about the future of work, I can't help but think about the impact we can have on those we lead. We have this incredible opportunity to impact our people's life beyond just their role. And maybe we're asking the wrong question when we come to work. Maybe it's not, how do we attract and retain great talent? Maybe the question we need to all be asking is this: how do we create a level of care so profound where people can't help but care back? Thank you.